Good evening, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of March. This is March 2025. Right. I lose track these days. Yep. And we've got a really, really good book for you this month. One of my favorite books that we picked, and I love all the books that we pick. So that's actually saying quite a bit. And the book is Raised by Ghosts, and it is BRIANA LOEWINSON.
Perfect.
Yeah, okay.
You crushed that.
We didn't practice it in advance, and I was actually nervous that I was, wait, maybe. Yeah.
There's a lot of extra letters, but you nailed it.
Very good, very good. And yeah, great book. A Bay Area book, and yeah, something I really liked quite a bit. And I'm really glad that you're here and face to face to talk about it.
Coincidence. I am really excited to be here. I feel super honored to be picked for this graphic novel club, and I love your shop so much, and I'm just so happy to be here.
Thank you. You were really aggressive about trying to get us to pick the book too. Like in a good way, not in a bad way. Not in a. That was not what I meant to.
Yeah, watch out, guys.
Imply, But yeah, no, you're like, hey. Yeah. I'd love to do this. Here's the book.
I love your shop so much.
Love it.
Yeah. So thanks for having me.
Nice. Well, it's always good when we love the comics too. So that's. That works really nicely. You've probably watched one or two of these shows before, right? Yeah. So you know that the first question is the same of all these because I really like this question, and I think it really gets to kind of the core of what the club is about, what this comic shop is about. Why comics? Of all the things you can be doing,
and all the gin joints in all the world,
yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a number of things that drove me to comics. I read comics as a child, so I grew up at bedtime. Instead of being read children's books, I was read comic books. So my parents were hippies, so we had a lot of comic books in our house. So I was read a lot of like underground comics, so a lot of like R. Crumb, Yellow Dog, Larry Gropnik, like
as a child. Interesting.
And then also a lot of the newspaper comics, so Linda Berry, Life and How, Far Side, Calvin and Hobbes. So those were like the books that I grew up with. They were hippies, so there was no rules of content and really no questions asked. I just accepted it all. I was like, oh. Yeah. But what I really loved about that was that every artist was so different. So that to me was very magical, that there was no rules about it. So I just innately just always loved comics. And then I also really loved drawing as a child. It was something that was really comforting to me. And then, so I continued drawing and I continued searching out, I grew up in the Bay Area, so there's always been so many great comic book shops in my generation for me to find all the indie comics that I could find. I don't really know anything about superheroes, which I used to be embarrassed about. Now I just have to own it because it's just, I am what I am.
We are going to have a test.
Yeah, and I'm going to fail. I feel like I'm in school again. So then I went to art school and, I was trying to figure out what kind of art I wanted to do. And I kept getting told by my teachers that my art was too narrative. Okay. So then first I looked up what that word meant. And then it was like, oh, I like telling stories. And then I was like, I love comics and I love stories. And it's very portable because you just needed, at the time, I just had my sketchbook. I had a pencil and either a pen, or I would bring around like a little ink and quill. But I could do it. I didn't have to set up an oil painting set, or I didn't have to I could just take it wherever I wanted. And I am at heart a homebody who's very lazy. So I was like, ooh, all of this is really adding up. And once I started drawing them, I never stopped. I just really, once I first did panel to panel, I just loved it so much. And that's really kind of my like origin story of why and how I got into comics.
Yeah. So how young were you when you did your first comics?
So we definitely, in terms of sequential art, I would say I was probably 19. I was in college. Yeah, one of my earliest comics was I had a work study job in college at the gallery. So I just had to sit there all day in a quiet room by myself. So I would make these little fantasy comics about talking to the people who I didn't actually talk to. So that was like, I think one of the first comics I ever did. And I have it. I just never did anything with it ever. It just was for my own pleasure and enjoyment.
That's cool.
But we also did a lot of hanging out in cafes when I was in high school and like doing caricatures of people we knew and stuff. So that sort of also was a little bit of cartooning, but not sequential art.
Yeah. Were you, did you go to school for art?
Yeah, I went to liberal arts college. I went to Scritches College, which is one of the Claremont colleges, but I studied art there. But I really wanted to be around different types of people. I didn't want an artist schooling experience. I was like, I want to try and know as many different types of brains as possible. But I did study art.
And did Scripps have any kind of a comics program, or was it just general? Okay.
Yeah, no. So I went
so this was before
right.
before it became cool to be a
yes,
artist.
Yes. I loved my professors, but they were not particularly excited at my idea of comics.
Yeah.
Even though I really look up to them, I learned a lot from them. They were much more fine art is fine art. Why are you drawing comics?
Right.
As were a lot of my classmates, I felt like. So if anyone's listening, tell me that I'm wrong. I'd be happy to be told wrong by former classmates.
Yeah. And how did that influence what you thought you wanted to do? Did you?
Well, only made me want to do it more.
Okay.
So I am raised by hippies in Berkeley. I was like, oh, you don't want me to do this? You guys don't like this? Okay. So it did really spur me on to do as well as I could do in this medium.
Yeah. Did you start like making minis for shows and things like that?
Yeah, so I started making mini comics, which my understanding is now they're called zines. That's what all the young people say.
Sure.
I teach high school, and so I try to use the terms that I think are out there now. But I started making mini comics, in college. And at first I just made them and like gave them to friends. The first actual book that I made was a book of 3 breakup stories, like 3 of my friends who had gone through breakups. And then I made like weird little stories vaguely based on their breakups. And then after college, I moved to New York and lived there for a couple of years, and I would sell them on consignment in shops. And then when I moved back to the East Bay, I would do the same thing. And then I met all my comics bros from the Bay and started going to like Ape and all the cons and stuff. Yeah.
How did your first book, Ephemera, come about?
So Ephemera, it was a really kind of a pleasure to write, even though it's a sad book. So the way that it happened was I had made minis comics for a long time, and then I made this crazy decision to have children, and that really put the kibosh on making comics for a while. And then I was teaching. My kids had gotten old enough. I think they were like 5 and 8 when I started writing that, somewhere in that area. So they were sort of, they could do things on their own. They didn't need me as much. I was done parenting. Just kidding, guys. But what happened was COVID happened, and I'm a high school teacher, and we bargained with the school that it made sense for us me and my best friend, Tin Pham, who is also a cartoonist, and also we teach together at Bishop O'Dowd High School for Genius Children. We bargained that we should teach from school so that we could have all of our supplies with us. So we got to go to school when no one was there except for us. And it was the best. I know COVID is bad. I know that, but I've never had it, so I'm not sure if it's real. I'm just kidding. But it was so awesome. No, everyone in my house has had it a million times. But so we would go to school and we would teach. And the first day that COVID happened, I texted Tin and I was like, hey, bro, let's do a daily comic. We get 2 weeks off of school. This is going to be such a fun little project. And he was like, sounds great. So we started a daily comic. And then COVID did not end in 2 weeks. And then on day 100, I was like, bro, I am losing my mind. I can't do it. So I was like, we can't do it anymore. But we had built up this awesome practice where we would go to work, we would teach our class. And then while the kids were working on Zoom with their cameras off, we would just draw.
Right.
So what we decided to do was to both work on a memoir. So Tin wrote Family Style, which did great, won the Eisner. And then I started working on Ephemera, and I didn't really know what I was going to do at all. I was like, I just want to do something about my childhood, and I wanted to do something about my mom, and I really love drawing plants. And that sort of it was like those things were swirling around in my head, and I sort of just started with no idea of where I was going to go and what story I was going to tell, like what parts I was going to tell. And it really, that book was really just about that fogginess of memory that you can't quite remember. Sure. That's what I was really trying to explore with that, things are so formative, but you can't totally remember them, and how intense that is. So that's sort of like how that all happened and why it's sort of like in that sort of dreamy state. Yeah.
So how did it get to Fantagraphics? I guess was part of the question, right?
I see. How did it actually come to be?
How did you go from
this lady
from fooling around with comics to publishing comics?
Yeah. Guys, I'm not a COVID denier. Please get vaccinated. It was great. So I worked on that book with it was the first long book I'd ever written. Yeah. Like I'd never written anything more than probably 16, 20 pages. Yeah. But I really was I was in it to win it. And I got 50 pages done. And then I started shopping it around, and I shopped it around because I know so many people in comics, I could send it sort of directly to people who are at the publishers.
Yep.
I got several offers, which was exciting. I got several no thank yous, which was not as exciting. And I picked Fantagraphics because always loved their book so much. It was I couldn't, even though the other people who wanted it, they were lovely, wonderful publishers. I was just so thrilled to work with Fantagraphics because I knew they would make just such a pretty book. And that's really what I'm in the business of.
Yeah. And so no agent or anything,
No
you just
agent.
did it yourself. Wow.
Just a bold lady, sending it out. Yeah. So I just sent it out, and I worked with Eric Reynolds, and he was my editor for that. And it was great. We have a really good working relationship, and they really just believe in their artists, and I really love that.
So you had 50 pages of it
and I wrote out what would happen.
Sure.
I wrote like a 1-page, like I can finish this story, because that's the problem is a lot of people can start a book, but then it's more difficult to finish the book. And so that one sheet I think helped see where the direction was going to go. But then they had a really good sense of the art style, because 50 pages is a bunch of pages.
It is a bunch of pages.
Yeah. Although I did draw them all in the wrong resolution and had to redraw them because I am a nincompoop. So that was a little bit depressing.
Wow.
But they're better now, I think, because of it, because I did them more awesome.
Yeah.
But it was a little sad when I realized that.
Well, I was going to ask you too about sort of the editing process when you walk in with 50 pages. Like, did Eric give you suggestions to make those first 50 pages better? So maybe it was
he was just like, awesome.
Yeah.
We used to joke about it because his books are with a bigger publisher. And so he would be on line 24, 18A, edit this.
Right.
He'd be like, what are your edits? And I'd be like, Eric loves it. I don't know. He says, good job. Can't wait for more.
Yeah.
But he was really helpful to talk things through and just encourage me to tell the story as authentically as I could. So I think I think that's why it's a good fit for me. Yeah.
Which brings us, I guess, to Raised by Ghosts.
Yeah.
I assume that there was kind of no shopping around on this one.
No, there wasn't. I started on it immediately after finishing Ephemera because it takes so long for a book to come out, and I really had wanted to do something about notes, and I was so jazzed about it. I was doing all these sketches of high school, and so I wrote Eric, and I was like, I had this idea, and he's like, oh, let's talk about it, and we met, and I was like, here's my idea, I made a whole pitch thing for him. He's like, I don't think he even looked at it. He's like, sounds great. And I was like, great, this is going great. And it was really good. And he was helpful because it's a little bit of a different take on how to compose words and pictures.
Sure.
And so it was helpful to have a sounding board for how that was going to look and to keep the tone the way that I was trying to do.
Yeah. And am I wrong in assuming that you sort of did more documentation of the book up front, like script, etc., or no? Okay.
I'm a real
just it comes into your head and you draw it.
Yeah, I think super visually, and I just don't have that skill. We're friends with a lot of cartoonists, and a lot of people know the end of the book first, or they know here's what it's all about, and that is not my vibe. I'm just here's something I'm really interested in exploring, and I just start, and then what I do is I just put all the things that are interesting to me. And then at some point through the process, I'm like, oh, okay, this is how this is going to be a great end to this book. And then sometimes I have to go back and put a couple pages in the beginning or kind of splice things in. But that's sort of what works best for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great way to work if you can work that way.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It works pretty well for me. I've tried to write a script out, and I just can't do it. It's so sterile to me. Yeah. And I envy people that can. I love it. I'm in awe of that, but I can't do it really.
The ones who surprise me are the ones who literally write not just a script, but they write a screenplay.
Like a screenplay. No, right? 100%. That's
beat by beat, and how can you
see it in both ways? That's what's so. I can really only see it visually, but I do write a lot. I write a lot of prose to myself and notes and stuff like that. So I do a lot of that type of thing, but it's more just rambling nonsense.
Yeah. I just wonder how if you've written everything out that it's still fresh to draw, because to me, I don't draw. I'm not an artist, but if I was in my head, I would need that. I would need that.
Right.
Immediacy, give and take of
and to me, when I draw something, I'm then that is what makes me want to do the next thing. That's what's oh, that looks great, but what would look great after that is this. And to me, that is the sequentialness of comics, is that it's a story telling itself. So I think that's just the way my brain processes it. So it's amazing to me that someone can keep that in their head while not doing it. I want to like do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And was there any challenge for you to do 200 pages the second time?
No, it was really,
okay.
I mean, I could write 200 more. I just,
okay.
it's such, I really, you know, high school is a, you know, not like the awesomest time, but like it is, I really am endlessly fascinated by it.
Sure.
And I'm friends with a lot of people in the book I am still very, very close with. And I live in the same area that I grew up in. So it's very alive to me. And these people have grown and changed and turned into fully fleshed out humans. And I think that that's what makes the memories even more like rich for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a real love letter to the Bay Area. I mean, particularly the East Bay, not really San Francisco, but
I love the West Bay too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, no, I mean, it was really touching and really emotional. And, you know, actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you kind of was like, are you okay? Because it's very sad, right?
I know.
Like you're very lonely in this book.
I know. Yeah, I can't not write sad books. Like I really want to write, like one of my favorite cartoonists is Julia Wirtz, and she's just so funny to me. And I would love to be able to write a hilarious book. And I, in my mind, am a hilarious human, but the books I write are all like, but that's sad. I love it. Like I just like in creating it, I just like want to keep making these sad books. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I am doing great.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Is there any fear in telling a story like this that it won't be taken the right way, or that, you know, or again, that you're gonna, you know, misremember your friends?
Right. Yeah. I mean, part of my problem is also my strength is my chutzpah, which is like, I did not consider that for the year and a half that I wrote this book. I was like, this is great. This is a great idea. Everyone's going to love this. I love it. This is amazing. And then like, I feel like I heard or saw the email. I was like, it's gone to press. And I was like, wait, what have I done? Like, I didn't think about anything. Like, what is this person going to think? Like, what if I didn't do this? Like, and I just am so confident when I'm working on something, which also happened with Ephemera. I was like, I didn't even know that I would have feelings about it after I made it. And it's been similar with that, where I was like, oh, this is very personal. Yeah. Didn't really think about that. I just went out and did it. So, but I think that ultimately I just can't really work any other way. So yeah.
I'm just impressed with that. That's all.
I don't know if it's impressive or just foolhardy.
Yeah. I mean, it could be both things.
Yeah.
Right?
I am impressive and foolhardy.
There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. What about through the craft process? What's your process? Do you work pen and paper? Do you work digital? How do you work?
So the books are all digital. So everything's done on an iPad. I do all the storyboarding I do in a sketchbook, and I can't explain to you why I do that. So my thumbnails are terrible. Like they're not, like some artists have like these beautiful, almost fully fleshed out thumbnails. Yeah. Mine are like a box with a line, like a circle and a line. I'm like, that means a person standing in a dark hallway. Like in my head, I can totally read that. So I do have these sketchbooks that are now just filled with this garbage, but I know what it means because I think I need to be able to see how the pages are going to go. I'm very into the page turn, like what happens next. So I have to be able to see that. And I haven't figured out mentally how to do that on an iPad yet. There's something very final about making a new file on an iPad, whereas there's something endless about a sketchbook. So I do all the finished art is on an iPad, but I do a lot of sketching and thumbnailing in a sketchbook. And then I do a lot of writing. So I always have probably for any book, maybe like 6 Google Docs where I can put different thoughts at different times just to kind of have a space to get ideas out and document them. And then I never delete any of it because it's like, there's might be a moment where I wish I had it. So a lot of that is really useful to me that I go and pull from.
So in this kind of, let's call it spitball writing, I guess, like what percentage would you say you end up using?
Oh, of the writing?
Yeah.
Probably of the writing, I probably like 30%.
Wow.
Yeah. Like not a lot of that. And then, but so much of the book is like, because I've thought about it and I've molded over in this very like non-judgmental way where I'm not feeling like I have to produce a good product. It's just like the very first writing I did for this book was I saved all my notes from high school. Did you write notes in high school?
I did not. No.
You did not?
I did not. No.
All right, I'll send you a note. But I saved all of them. So I have like giant bags of these notes.
Really?
Yeah. They have them all. And like even scraps of paper, like little things written on. I was like, I don't even know why I would have saved this. Why did I do that? And so I looked through them all, and then I took notes on everyone's style. So each person I would try to like think of like, what is it that makes like a note from Jacob sound like a note from Jacob? So I'd write about this handwriting style, how he folded the note, like what he would write about. And then I would go to the next person. I'd be like, this is how Julia wrote notes. Like, this is how Darcy wrote notes. This is how all these. So that is how I started to get into the mindset of it. What's the question?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, how did I get started? Yeah. So that is how I sort of got started on writing the book.
Yeah.
Was reading through these notes, and that was the first writing that I did, was taking notes on it. And then I did another document that was really fun, which was like, what are just things from the 90s that felt very 90s to me? So I would give myself little prompts. So it would be like talking on the phone, and then I would like write a bunch of like, what were all the things that I could possibly remember? Like, what did it feel like? What were the like logistics of it? What made it an interesting experience, or riding the bus, or waiting? Like there's a big thing. Waiting is like a big thing for me. Like we don't have that as much anymore, you know, because to the young people in the audience, you would make a plan with someone, but there was no way to get a hold of them. And so you wouldn't know if they were going to be late. So you didn't know how long to wait at the place you were supposed to meet and if they were ever going to show up. And that was just such like a big part of our life that is gone.
And we didn't have the distraction tool in our pockets,
and you literally
like
were just picking at your shirt or like staring at the whatever. So that was a really fun thing to work on. And there were some that didn't make it into the book that I wish, so those are some of my like writing things that I do.
So we mentioned, or you mentioned a little bit about how it's kind of got a different structure than a lot of comics, in terms of there's a block of text and then often it's just silent comics following it. What was the thought behind that? What thought?
So the conceit of the book, to those who haven't read it, I'm sure everyone has.
You've all read it.
If you haven't, you should get it. But it's
people at home haven't read it.
Yes, people at home. But it's basically like a series, like a vignette, like a little story of comics, often with little to no dialogue, and then a note that goes along with it. And that's sort of the pacing of the book until there's a break later on in the book. But I had a lot of different ideas of how I was going to incorporate these notes, because all I knew was I'm doing something about notes. Like, I don't think that we have, as a culture, talked enough about how fun that was. And, I talked about like, that could be the narration at the top of each panel, a little torn piece of paper, or that might be another idea I had was like, it could just be about a note that gets passed to a bunch of different people and how things moved, and not even have notes portions in it. But I felt that what really interested me at the end of the day was how what we wrote in the notes didn't tell the full story, and that you could learn more from the scene, and then you could learn more from the note, and that they could each inform each other, and not and that you would like, because as I read these notes, I was like, I had no idea what was happening or when I got these notes. They weren't dated, so it's like I'd have to try to figure out, and most often you can't. You have no idea when these notes were written. But I really liked that idea to write about, like what we say and what we don't say, and then it sort of has more of like a journal feel to it, even though in my head they're notes. But I do have one journal that spans freshman year to senior year of high school that is horrific. And when I read it, that was what gave me like the voice for the notes, because I was like, okay, because that is where you write all of your deepest, darkest thoughts, like all the intensity of being like a teenager, and that's what came together. And then I like the idea of like, well, what if I just paired it, because I didn't really feel like I'd seen that much. And I really love when the text doesn't totally handhold you through the images. So that's sort of how I ended up putting it together like that.
It's interesting because in San Francisco high school in, I don't know, what was that, 84, 85, something like that, I don't know anybody who wrote notes. There were slam books. That was the thing.
And I thought that was just something in movies.
No. There were slam books then. And so,
did you slam?
Usually only about the teachers.
Oh, okay. Ooh, I love that. Well, I wonder who has those.
I don't know. Who knows?
I ended up with all. So I had this one group of gals, and there were 4 of us, and we would buy a journal, and then we would take turns writing notes in it, and we would pass it around. So we had an order, and we would each get like my turn, and then Kelly's turn, and then Amber's, and then Heather's, and you just go around. So I ended up with all of those, and those are great because we're teenage girls, we're getting in fights, but we still had to write in the journal, obviously. So then there'd be these passive aggressive like interchanges, and it's so incredibly wonderfully documented. And so I wonder who has your slam books.
Yeah, I could not tell you.
I wonder where it is.
Yeah.
But I think note writing has been going on for a long time. I think it just goes in different areas. Yeah.
I just, it's always funny how sort of different ecosystems happen at different
because it's so close.
Yeah. Funny.
No, it was alive and well.
Let me ask you about the use of space, particularly in the first, it's 2/3 more or less, where you're not using the full page at all. Was there a reason for that in your head, or?
I really wanted it to feel, so the first part of the book, it's almost every page has 4 panels. So it's 4 panels and then maybe a couple pages of that and then a note. Sometimes it's a full panel. But I really wanted it to feel very staccato and contained. So it's always a square. It is like very like you get into this sort of like rhythm, because I think that that's sort of like how things felt, and it was very isolating because this is a lot about sort of feeling disconnected and finding connection. And then, which worked out perfectly for when I had the idea then to break that at the end of the book, and then it's full bleeds and it's large pages and it's like the letters overwrite the text, the images. And so at first it was just to have that kind of feeling of like being contained and isolated.
And all of the white space really does that, I think. Okay, and then a little past the halfway point, you start going full bleed. And is this a vision? Is this a revelation?
What is this to me?
Yeah, what is it to you? Yeah.
Well, to me, this is like going into the drawing world. So I was like working on this book and I was like, I wasn't even sure where am I going with this book? Like, what am I talking about? And then it was like, I am talking about how these notes and drawing like saved my brain. Like it really helped me like navigate, and it still does. And so for me, that's like trying to show like what it feels like to use that as a tool to understand the world around me. It just makes it make more sense. Like all my sketchbooks are just filled with pages basically like that, of just these weird little surreal things happening. And it just, for me, has always made sense that way. And so this is like my little like delving into that.
Yeah. So did this way of presenting it, a way of thinking of it, come to you as an adult, or is this how you felt as a teenager?
I think, this section for me is sort of like insight into like, this is what I've been doing this whole time in my head, and like in my sketchbooks and when I've been drawing, has just felt like this is where I live the most comfortably. But I'd never really put it in a book particularly. And I really like the idea of mixing it with this, like the book is very hyper accurate to like everything looks exactly like what my room looked like, or our houses, we moved a lot, or like what we wore, like everything is very down to the detail. And I was enjoying that because ephemera was so different. And then I wanted this to be like, but this is what it felt like this. So that's that juxtaposition, I guess.
And then after you get through, and I just thought of it as a revelation, right? All of a sudden, the pages are then big, right? Like I don't just mean the full bleed ones, but I mean like the panel to panel, and you're out of the grid, and it feels like freedom is happening.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of like in the book, like she kind of gets to this, or I get to this crisis moment, and then it's like, okay, well, I'm delving into this drawing world, and then it's like, once I can connect those pieces, then it just feels like you can like truly like feel your life. That was sort of the thinking. And then it feels more, I think, then having the panels change size on every page. It like looks really different, and to me that felt like, now you feel like you can breathe again, like after all of those little 4 panels, and then you go into that dark part, and then it's like, okay, now it's just like average life. Like some panels are big and some are small, and some have this and some are zoomed in and some are out. Like, and so it felt more real.
It's funny, the dark part, I didn't feel darkness from it though. I felt, there is dark stuff in there.
But it's not,
crawling through and trying to figure out, but I don't know, it felt liberating to me.
I just meant dark, visually. It's not. I wasn't trying with this book to like delve into like the worst parts of my life. Like I wasn't really exploring that particularly.
I'm curious about the color palette, and because it's a physically dark book. grays and browns and sepia colors, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that
Okay. I just like that. I just wanted to feel like the drawing style is also like I drew it. There are no ink lines. It's all just started with pencil and I just kept refining it. So it's all drawn with like a pencil on Procreate. But I wanted it to feel like you could have just opened a note and there was this little sketch in here. So that's like why I went with that style, that it almost felt more like a part of the notes. And with the colors, I wanted it just to feel that nostalgia. You know, if there are these super bright colors, to me, that's not what I think of when I think of my life as a young person. I think it feels like old and aged and yeah.
Did you have any concern about sort of the readability of the palette, you know, in terms of storytelling? And because some of the panels are really dark and you kind of have to, you know, not squint at them to figure out what's going on, but I'm old too. I'm getting old.
I figured it would just be fine. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's beautiful, and I think it works so effectively. I just, you know, the sort of the thought process of why an artist chooses a particular thing is always fascinating to me.
Yeah, that wasn't particularly with this in like an effort to make it dark. I think it's just sort of how it turned out when I was drawing it. Yeah. Did your
parents read the book?
Let me tell you, they're both dead.
Oh,
yeah. So
sorry.
that's okay. They both died before Ephemera came out. So they have not seen either of them that I know of, unless they have that capacity. Yeah. So they haven't seen it, and I don't know. I think they would have liked it, but I don't know if my mom would have liked it too much. But I think my pops would have liked it. He would have just been amused. Yeah.
Well, I mean, particularly if he was into underground comics, I think that, I mean, this is honest in the way that whole movement of comics was.
Yeah. I spoke recently, my pops was a criminal defense lawyer in Oakland for 30 years, and his law partner just called me on the phone the other day, and he was like, I read your book. And I was like, oh, great. Thanks for reading it. And he was like, well, I wanted more secrets about your dad. And I was like, sorry about that. And I thought that was such a funny thing to be mad about, that there were not more secrets about him. But he did tell me a funny story. Now I'm going to tell you guys, because he was sad it didn't make it in the book. And he said that one time my dad was talking about how when he was a teenager, he used to put a towel under his bedroom drawer so he could smoke pot, and my grandparents wouldn't be able to find out. And that then when he had children, he was doing the same thing, and how he thought that his life hadn't gone that far, and how funny that was. And my dad's law partner was like, this would have been great for your book. So now I'm sharing it with the world. That was such a funny story and such an insight into my dad.
It's also kind of funny to be a criminal defense lawyer and be a massive fucking stoner too.
I mean, it really makes sense if you think about it.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. I think he was really enjoying his work. Yeah. He was a small time criminal defense lawyer. So a lot of, let's get this guy who had some pot on him off. And yeah, he did some good like pro bono stuff, but mostly those kind of things.
Yeah. I thought that the relationship with both of your parents, I mean, it was the way that you portray it, it's almost tragic.
I kind of view them as tragic figures. I think that's why I am so productive, is I think I just watch two people who like never really used their lives in a way. I mean, I'm very admiring of my dad's law stuff, and he was a poet, which isn't my thing, but he loved it. But my mom just didn't really ever do anything, and it just makes me so sad to think about. And so, yeah, I think of them as tragic figures a little bit too. Yeah.
In doing this book, has it made you think at all about your own children or you being a parent, I suppose?
No, absolutely. I mean, so I was born in 1980. So, you know, in the 80s and 90s, and very much a latchkey kid. My parents, if you couldn't tell, I did not have a lot of rules in my house. I was alone a lot. We were allowed to do anything. I used to wander the neighborhood when I was 5, just wherever I wanted to go, just nonsense abounds. And so it's so interesting being a parent now, and the things that I'm like, it's shocking to me that the way that my house was compared to how my cozy little house is now. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and yeah, it's just so different. It's very interesting
Yeah.
when you're especially for me as a little, the kids are little, I was like, oh, they're just tiny babies and you're so stressed out all the time. I was like, it didn't come up as much, but when they're bigger, it's like you really like, well, I remember being that age and what it felt like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the way society thinks we're supposed to act to our children is very, very, very different. I mean, much like you, I was a latchkey kid.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was 13 years before you,
Yeah.
but still essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, with my son, you know, we became helicopter parents and it was weird, you know, because that was the cultural thing that was happening at that time, is that, oh, you've got to make sure that they're okay from all the things in the world now.
Right. And I feel like
that's the opposite of what
I feel like I'm rebelling against the helicopter parents.
Yeah.
I'm like caught between rebelling against that and my parents who are just like, we don't care. And so I do struggle with that, because sometimes you have to like pretend to not care. And that's so weird. It's just like, oh, I do want to know what they're doing, but I'm just going to sit over here and ignore them. It's so great. Like intentional ignoring. I took up knitting for a minute when my kids were little. I did not really enjoy it. I wanted to, but I just needed something to do. So I wouldn't like stare at them all day. So I was like, I'm just going to do this thing off in the corner, so I don't just like gaze at their little faces. Yeah. You can't win.
You can't win, no.
Yeah.
But you know, you can't lose. If you love them.
Yeah.
You know, and if you try your
and
best,
we can do better
right?
than was done before, and that's all we can do.
Like I think ultimately parenting is very much like making comics, right? There's no one way to do it.
Yeah.
There's no handbook.
And they're also, the kids are so different.
And the kids are all different.
Yeah.
Right?
When we had our first kid, we were like, we're crushing it. And then we had our second kid and we were like, whoa, this is super hard. Like we have no skills. Like what? But then we really had to like become real parents, I feel like, with our second kid. And I'm so glad we did. Yeah. They're just really different. Yeah. Just like comics. It's true.
I don't know. How about y'all? Does anybody here have any questions for her? One of you must have something. Come on. A room full of silence.
I'll ask you just for funsies.
Cat Kelly.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know, but we keep ephemera on our devastating reads show.
Ooh.
For when people come in, they're like, I need to, hurt my own feelings. I need a good cry. I need to feel something. That is where that lives. Do you have like a movie or an album that you go to when you're like, I need to feel some stuff?
I need to feel the feels.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a lot of movies that are definitely going to make me cry. I really love this old movie called Stage Door, with Ginger Rogers and Katharine Hepburn, and their actresses living in like a boarding house. And it makes me cry every time, as does It's a Wonderful Life. And music, I don't put on albums too much to cry, but then there's like, Brandi Carlile has a song about being a mom, and that makes me cry. And I feel like such a sap, but she got me. Every time it comes on, I cry. And there's a line in whatever Bob Dylan song that is where he says the poet who died in the gutter, and that makes me cry because it makes me think of my dad. But I really honestly watch mostly comedies. I feel like I should be like a humor writer. You'd think it, because I really can't handle being sad in other people's content that much, but then I only want to make sad content.
It's like Junji Ito makes all horror, but is a delight to be around.
Yeah.
You're hilarious.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm mostly watching like White Men Can't Jump and The Good Boys, but while I'm like drawing these sad dead moms.
Interesting. Do you think that is gonna go forward in your career? Are you just gonna keep kind of,
I don't know,
work in that vein?
Yeah, I don't know. I really can't decide. I've come up with like 17 different story ideas for my next book. I like really can't decide what I want to do. Some of it's autobio, and some of it is just totally more of like a little surreal story based on something else. Like I really can't decide. I would like to work on trying something different, but I just keep going back to like what's a sad story. So I don't know. Well, much like writing my books, I like really don't know what's going to come next. Yeah.
I think you could do funny though. I mean, you're certainly funny in person.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I'm interested to try that out someday. It's so weird to not have it come naturally to me in a comic form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you already have your next idea sort of sketched out? Or?
No, I've been doing a bunch of different sketches of different ideas. So I'm really in like an idea phase. With ephemera, I was so like ready to tell some sort of story and sort of knew the aesthetic that I wanted for it. And then with Raised by Ghosts, I was like so bent on this notes thing. So I haven't hit exactly the thing that I want to do quite yet for this next one, but I am excited to get started. So
how long did it take you to do Raised by Ghosts?
It took me about a year and a half, maybe a little bit less.
That's pretty speedy.
Yeah, I'm a full-time high school teacher, and I have 2 kids.
Wow.
Yeah, I was really in it.
Does that include sort of the pre-search part you were kind of describing,
like
with
writing
going through the
I mean,
notes?
all of that was sort of happening concurrently to starting to draw it. I probably maybe did 10 sketches before I actually started putting first panels together. And the very first panels I did was the Friday night eating the microwavable dinner. That was like the first scene that I drew. Yeah, but all of it together was about a year and a half. And then I had all this like other research the whole time because I would get sent photos or, I'd get new content to study up on, which was great. Yeah.
That microwave dinner felt particularly latchkey to me.
Yeah, it was really the best. TGIF and eating microwave dinner by yourself, no one bothering you.
Did you have a favorite microwave dinner?
Oh, for sure. I loved fettuccine Alfredo.
Okay,
my top 3 would be fettuccine Alfredo. I loved the beef stroganoff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also loved the turkey dinner with the little like apple cranberry thing, or sometimes I feel like it came with like a brownie.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, there was some sort of chocolatey thing, and it always cooked wrong.
Yeah, parts were crispy, parts were gooey.
Yeah.
And then when it was the apple cranberry thing, it was like that hot goo that like burned your mouth on the edge. It was so good.
Yeah.
I loved it.
But the texture of the top kind of icky at my tongue.
A little bit icky.
Yeah.
And then a little uncooked in the middle, maybe. Yeah. Loved it. It was a good time.
It's funny that there was enough time between our 2 childhoods, but a lot of the things that you're describing, a lot of the things that are in the books, were contemporary because time moves slower.
That's what I was gonna say. I feel like because it was like pre-digital, which it's just moving so fast. My kids are already telling me like what the next gen is. I was like, kids born in 2025 or Gen XY or something. And I was like, what are you even saying right now? These aren't words. But I feel like it did move so much slower before that time. And I think that's why it could have felt like a very similar childhood. Yeah. From, even though we're 10 years apart or whatever it is. Yeah. Wasn't too bad. Wasn't the worst.
I was born in 1967, so a little.
You're as old as my half sister. She was 67 as well.
Yeah.
And you grew up in San Francisco?
No, I grew up mostly in Brooklyn.
What part of Brooklyn?
Cobble Hill.
Oh, okay.
But when Cobble Hill was not a nice neighborhood, now it's a very, very, very shishy neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I always feel weird when I tell people Cobble Hill because they
yeah.
get a picture in their head, which
infuriating.
is, it was not like that at all.
Yes.
Yeah, it was half Italian and half Puerto Rican.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was basically the only blonde kid.
They're like, what is this?
Right. No, and I got the shit kicked out of me
Sure.
all the time for being blonde of all things, right?
Yeah,
like,
welcome to America.
Yeah, I know. It's just not a thing that you usually hear, right?
I know.
You know? And
Yeah, I lived in Emeryville. My pops, when he first moved out, we lived in Emeryville in 1984. So there was like one house in Emeryville and then like a wasteland of like defunct factories.
Right.
But now if I was like, I'm from Emeryville, they would think I lived above like Bay Street Mall. It's like, no. Or we lived in Berkeley, but where we lived, it was like the crack epidemic had just happened. It was like really popular in our neighborhood and it was like not cute. But now that area's adorable.
Right.
It's like, no, but you can't, just gotta be like, yeah, you weren't there.
Yeah. The thing I remember the most about moving from Brooklyn to San Francisco was that the school ages were different, that high school started there at 6th grade. So we were about to be the big man on campus grade, and then we came to San Francisco, and you're
the low man on the totem pole.
Exactly. It was really like really messed my head up. No one told me, right? And even if they had told me, what the heck would I have done about it? You know.
That's so terrible.
Yeah.
So you moved here in 6th grade. What a horrible time to move across the country.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah.
That is terrible. Where'd you go to middle school?
Roosevelt.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and then McAteer for high school. So yeah. And McAteer then was, they had some of the School of the Arts that was not really School of the Arts, but there was a couple of programs that were like hippie program leftovers.
Yeah.
One that was called Urban, where all the students sat up on the desks and called the teachers by their first names.
They're just, oh, captain, my captain.
Yeah, it was a very strange environment because you had the theater kids and then you had these urban kids and yeah.
Wait, which school were you in?
I was in regular McAteer.
Just regular. You're like, I do not sit on a desk.
Yeah, I was in regular McAteer. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
Strange.
Was that a public school?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I feel like it was great going to school in the Bay Area because you really got to see the whole world.
Yeah.
You got to see all kinds of different people and
How did you first get into comics?
Oh, well, I mean, first was buying them at a bodega in Brooklyn around the corner from our house.
A little spinny.
Yeah. I was allowed to go 2 blocks in any direction by myself, at any time. And so there was a bodega there that I could go and get comics. And so, I probably my first ones were like Richie Rich and Archie and shit like that. But
I loved Archie.
I do remember my first superhero comic. It was an issue of Justice League of America. It had Santa Claus dead in the snow on the front cover.
You're like, this is the life I need.
Right. And the Justice League was all standing around going, who killed Santa Claus? We have to figure it out. The comic opens, and this is great. It opens with Green Lantern Hal Jordan taking a shower, and he slips on a bar of soap and cracks his head open, and the magic ring flies off his finger and goes, have to go find, there's a Justice League emergency, have to find the backup Green Lantern. Which, like, when you're a kid,
really
like, what is that?
Ideas.
What kind of thing is that? Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Do you still have it?
I have a reprint of it. I don't have the original. Yeah. No, I never cared about keeping the original.
Yeah.
That's the funny part about opening a comic shop, right? Like you very quickly lose the like, oh, I've got to have them all in perfect.
Because you have them all here. Yeah,
exactly.
That's pretty great.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah. It's a thing,
It's a thing.
Yeah.
How long is the shop? The shop has been open
since 1989. Yeah, 36 years in April. Next month. God, like 12 days, 36 years. Wow. No, I mean, it's, look, most of my staff are younger than the store.
Yep.
I
have some students in the audience who are younger than the store.
Right. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yes, you are. You're younger than
another cute, speaking of your students in the audience, which is very cute that you are here. Thinking more about school and your day job. And I feel like you and Tim are amazing because teachers are the most overworked and criminally underpaid superheroes on planet Earth.
Yep.
And comics are the most time-consuming art you could possibly do. Like that shouldn't work. But what is it like, talking to your students about art, especially when things are constantly, I've had even still is insane to me that it's not just a life.
Yeah.
Like what's the vibe?
What's the vibe? The vibe is good. Like right now, the vibe is great. I love you guys, but this teenage gen right now they're just like so into stuff. Like they want to like know things that no one's heard of. Like it's a very like, I feel like I'm really like, ooh, this is my people. Like they're like, I don't know that band. Who's the artist? What did they do before? Like they're like, I have a zine club where these kids come and make zines. They'll do like a little presentation. Then they do it's great. It's very heartwarming. But as to like the job itself, it's kind of perfect because I give a lesson and then the students have to work. Like a lot of my job is just like the students are working. And so I also work. And sometimes like right now in my painting 2 class, I'm teaching gouache, which is probably my favorite paint. And so I am doing a gouache project with them. But oftentimes I'm just working on my comics so I can get work done while they work. And I think they love it because they get to see what I'm working on. Sometimes they'll like ask questions or give ideas or, it's like, and their teacher's doing like a professional thing in the arts. So it's pretty cool. And our school is very supportive of the arts. They're really, really, really great about art at O'Dowd. So it's been sort of the perfect like marriage of like my 2 interests. Like even if I made like millions of dollars off my comics, which I'm sure I will, I would never quit. I really just I love teaching so much, and it's so inspiring to be around kids, and they're so interesting, and it's such a great age. I love teenagers' minds and where they're at, and so it's actually kind of gives you a lot of time to work.
How long have you been teaching?
I started in 2006, so almost 20 years.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you seeing in terms of, because you mentioned that this current crop is really interested. Do you think that part of that is a reaction to their experiences with COVID?
Yeah, that's what it is. You know, I think it's COVID. I think it's like brain rot meme life, like where, you know, you're seeing the same thing over and over again. It's like this like yearning to be like, what is something like different? Like, or what made this thing, like getting references for why something is funny or serious or whatever, like understanding that and just like not being like everyone else is like really like they just want to know more, which is fun, which is really like interesting. I wonder if it's like a transitional generation, because for a long time it was like skinny jeans, and then now it's like everyone's wearing everything. There's like skinny jeans, there's like giant pants, there's like so many things, and I wonder if we're like going into another like era right now. So I'm wondering if that's like why it's sort of like why I'm like, oh, I get that. I understand what's happening right now. I understand these kids.
I would say we're always going into a new era, though.
That's true. That's a true fact. Yeah, it's true. So I don't know, but yeah, I don't know what it is, but it could be just like the COVID that they're so like, they are very into like anything like tangible. Like the zine club is big. Ceramics is really big right now. So I teach the ceramics classes as well. And like when they first get their like first ceramics piece, it's so like, this is a real thing that I own and I can hold. And like, and conceptualizing, like when they're trying to figure something out, I'm like, well, what do you want to have? What do you want to have at the end of this thing? And that is like, oh, I can like make a thing that I can then have and use is like amazing to them. You know? So it's really nice in this digital age.
Yeah, no, that fills me with hope.
I know
in many ways.
Also, why I can never leave this job, because I'll be filled with despair.
Well, you know, come work in a comic shop.
I know. I might have both. Yeah, but it tempers the despair. Yeah.
I constantly am hearing from kids that they much prefer physical comic book to reading on the iPads and things like that, which, you know, I thought there was a minute there that I thought that it was all going to change and go away and we weren't going to have books anymore. But no, I think people don't like screens actually more than
I think you're right. Yeah. That it's just like getting a break and having the dullness of the paper is so satisfying.
Yeah. Well, and the boundary of the page too, right? Because space matters when you're telling a story like this. You know, this matters, and I think it.
When I read, I go back and forth a lot too. I read a lot of prose, and I'm constantly like going back and looking at things and going forward again. I like holding it. Like right now, I have to read a book to do an event with someone. I have to read their book, and I only have the digital galley, and I'm like, I'm excited to read their book, but I'm also like, I wish I could hold it, and I'm sad about it. It's not out yet. I can't hold it.
Yeah, no, like publishers constantly try to send me digital galleys, and I like literally can't read it. It's because it's formatted different anyway on the screen.
Doesn't that paper feel so nice?
No, the paper does feel. I was going to ask you about the physicality of this book.
Well, I picked the cover paper, that linen-y kind of texture. I wanted it to be paperback because it is ultimately at the end of the day for teenagers, and I didn't want to make some parent or whoever have to pay hardcover prices. So I was like, let's make it paperback. And then I love that linen texture because it kind of just felt more like a note or something like that. Yeah. So that was very intentional.
Yeah, there's a real weight and density to this book that I think helps its emotional points land in a way. Yeah. Which sounds silly. I
know, but it's better. It is better to read it in the book form than digitally. Yeah.
It's for young readers, you say, ostensibly. Yeah. But I think it really hits with adults. Yeah. Right? From the nostalgia of it.
Yeah. So for me, I have children, and the books that are like geared towards their ages, I find too young. They always want to read the next age group up, is what I've sort of found. And I think that a lot of books sort of like don't speak to the level that like kids are thinking at. And so what I did for this book is sort of like wrote to my teenage self, but also just wrote to my 40-something self of like, what would I want to read if I was a teenager? And just talking to myself, I was like, I think that will maybe gear itself towards a teenager, because teenagers do want to, they can really comprehend quite a bit. You know, we don't have to sort of talk down to them. So that was sort of my goal with it, was to, if I make it something that I'm interested in reading, I think a teenager will be interested in reading it. And then the nostalgia factor, I feel like was like, just like, I thought that would definitely be fun. Like that was for sure a huge part of writing this book. Was so fun getting all the little references and Easter eggs, especially if you're from the East Bay, and like sticking in as many as I could. And I knew that like so many people who experience these things would just like love that. And there's a love letter to that as well, of just like these things that we don't have anymore, or that some things that we do that we just loved so much.
Do you think that it's being marketed effectively to teen readers?
I think so. I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know a lot about marketing, but it seems like it says YA. I don't know. I don't know what you would change. So
I mean, I don't either. I'm just
I'm just saying,
brain,
I don't know. I think I say yes. But I like that ideally it would hit like the kids, but also their parents.
Right.
And that would be perfect. And everyone wants to buy this book. And then the
Well,
grandparents
that's how you
would be
become a
like,
millionaire.
that is how I become a millionaire, and I just teach for pleasure.
Yeah.
I donate my earnings. And then I think the grandparents would be like, why was my kid so messed up? And then they could read this book and see why. That's the dream.
Was there anything in the creation of the book that you changed or rethought because you were aiming for a young adult reader?
Well, what it really let me do was be like my ultimate self-indulgent in writing. Like I felt like I could go as like emotional as I wanted to, because I feel like with an adult book, it's too much. Like for a fully adult book, like it's like it really is trying to harness those feelings that you have when you're a teenager that are so big and so intense. And so I feel like putting it at YA just let me like unhinge and just like be as like ridiculous in that realm as I wanted to. Whereas I wouldn't do that with an adult book probably, because I think it would feel a little ridiculous.
Did you have any concerns about language or?
Not really. I think because I've taught high school for almost 20 years, I'm like, despite enjoying lots of, lewd, dirty, swearing comics and movies and whatever, I don't really like have much of a need to create that. So I didn't really need to do that. I was a little nervous because there's some teenage drinking in it. So I was like, I was a little worried about that, but it's just, it's not like it glorifies it. It doesn't condemn it particularly. It sort of is just sort of like, here, take this what you will. And I think it sort of gives like an accurate portrayal of what it felt like for my experience. So that is one of the things I was like, oh, is that not okay for like middle school? Like I wasn't, so that is something where I wasn't sure, but the middle schools have seemed fine. Yeah. So that's been great. Yeah.
Have you done like school visits for?
Yeah, I have a bunch coming up. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've done, I did middle school events for Ephemera even, which was kind of neat. Because again, like I think kids can really read much beyond what we designate for them. And so, so I have a bunch of school stuff coming up.
Not just can, but need to.
Want to. Like they want, it's good to stretch your brain. If you never are pushing it, then you can't make those synapses fire. Yeah.
I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
Anything? Come on. One of you has to have a question. You all read the book, right?
Yeah. Can you talk about the stylistic change between Ephemera and Raised by Ghosts? Look very different.
Yeah.
The color palette kind of similar.
Yeah. Yes, it is very different stylistically from Ephemera. So I really love drawing in different styles. So I probably have, 10 to 15 mini comics that I've made in my life prior to this. And I try to always switch up a style in some way. Even there's one set of 4 books that's like in the same world, but they're all drawn in sort of different styles. So I really enjoy that. And I think back to like just the first question, like that's what initially made me really love comics, is that we get to do it however we want to do it. And there really are no rules. And if people are telling you that there are rules, then they're wrong, in my opinion. So for me, it's really fun. And then so with Ephemera, I really wanted it to feel like, even though it is a memoir of like how I felt, it doesn't look like me. It doesn't look like Emeryville in 1984. It doesn't look like where I grew up. My mom doesn't look like that. I sort of set it in my mom's childhood era and then put it in this sort of dreamy, like the setting is supposed to feel, and for me feels like this old movie Rebecca, which is based on the book by Daphne du Maurier. And that kind of like, just like this endless gardens and trees and sort of fog. And that's sort of what I was going for with that. And that sort of watercolory aesthetic. And then with this, I really wanted it to feel scratchy and kind of like hand drawn. I wanted you to like feel the line work. And then I kept the colors pretty limited just so I think it just like makes the book feel a little more homogenous and makes sense, rather than like for me, too crazy. Sometimes I love a crazy color book with like just they're putting everything in it. But for this, I wanted it to kind of be a little bit united. And then the color like textures are actually exactly the same in both books. And I think that that is one thing that does unite them. I just really like that look. And now I'm very comfortable drawing on it. I kind of can't draw without it. When I start to draw without it, I'm like, oh, this looks insane. And I've gotten very used to it. So yeah, that was sort of the different style. And then for the other book, I wanted it to look totally different. But for this one, I really was like bent on making it look accurate, which is also why I didn't draw my parents, because I was just sort of like, they're a little tragic lives, didn't want to draw them. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it also really spoke to the isolation,
right.
And, your dad's always in his bedroom.
Yeah. And I give him the loopy, all of his word bubbles have like a little loop because I feel like he was always high. So this always seemed like he was like drifting conversation to me through a closed door. Yeah. Yeah. So I put all my family off screen.
Yeah.
Just because it didn't feel comfortable. And I don't have to do it if I don't want to. Yeah.
And your friends who you showed the book to, did they agree with their portrayals or?
Everyone has seemed fine so far.
Okay.
There was one at the beginning of the story in middle school. I'm friends with this girl and we were very close, and then we weren't friends, and we're not in super good touch. And we're like Instagram friends. And she was the only person where I was like, oh, I don't know if she's going to like not be into this, but she wrote me a very sweet little note. So,
nice.
So that was like the one thing I'd kind of been baiting my breath and like waiting for. So yeah, so it's all gone pretty well. But there are some friends that I didn't put in who were huge in my life, and that was hard. I think cutting things out is very difficult. Because ephemera, I cut so much out. Like I don't even have a dad in that book. And I think that, but I think for me to tell the story, you have to cut away all the stuff that's going to just confuse the reader.
Sure.
Yeah, to just tell the part you want to tell.
Well, I would argue that comics are all about editing,
right,
and all about taking away everything that isn't essential to the actual thing that you're trying to communicate that minute, even when you look panel by panel, right? Like you want the least that you can so that the audience is the one making the connection. Right.
Which is often why I don't put a lot of text in it, because I really like ambiguity, and I like letting the reader make their own interpretation. And if it's not the same interpretation that I have, that's totally fine for me. I know some artists are like, no, you have to get the point that I'm making, which is great. For me, I don't care at all. Like you could get something totally different, and like as long as you read it, that's awesome. And I love it, and if it means something different, I think that's like fascinating. Yeah. So that is why I think I leave a lot of the words out. And there's a bunch of text in the book that's not real text. I use like a little hash marks because it's like, it doesn't matter what they're saying. And I don't want you to get bogged down in like, well, that's not funny, or that's not accurate, or that's not this. I just want you to know that we're like having fun, or someone's yelling at me, or we're whatever it is.
Yeah,
the words don't matter.
It felt like a comics equivalent of wah, wah, wah,
right.
Wah, wah.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that until later. Like people have said that, and it's like, obviously that's what I was doing, but I did not even, I was just like, I'm a genius. Like I am coming up with some cool new stuff that no one's ever done before, even though I then literally referenced Peanuts and Charlie Brown later.
Yeah.
Just really didn't put that together.
It's all good,
the old noggin. Yeah.
It's all good. You said that you think a lot about the page turn. Can you give a particular example in the book where?
Can I look at it?
Yeah.
Can I look at my notes?
Yeah.
I didn't bring
by
my notes.
By all means. Because that to me is so much of comics is the page turn and the where the thinking comes in in doing that.
Yeah. This book is hard because it's so the notes really break it up.
Yeah.
But there's like going from waiting outside there's like you're waiting outside the club for a show to start for forever, and then just like the overwhelmingness of like a dark,
and then you're in the
so like that kind of thing. And then I don't know, I can't find one that I like love especially. But like going from like the love of a friend to the solitude, and then the very next day, like it's all been crushed. And like now when we turn the page, like what looks like sort of potentially this could be a sad or a cozy moment, you don't really know, but then you realize on the next page, ooh, things did not go very well.
Right.
So I like the setup and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I do love thinking about the page turn because it's like something so unique to comics.
Yeah.
And that the reader does the action. I love that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I wanted to ask about it just particularly because so many of these are 2 or 3-page thing. So you don't really have a lot of page turns.
I know, it's so much in
you know.
ephemera. I dealt so much with like what happens on the next page. Like when you asked me, I was like, oh, that is so interesting. So I think about it, but then I guess on this one, it's like so much less. Yeah. And maybe I guess the note is the page turn. So it's like, you see a scene of eating a microwave dinner, and then the note has like nothing to do with microwave dinners. And like, I guess to me, that's like the page turn in the book is like, here's this like totally other thing that's going on that you would not get. But if you go back and look at the panels, you're like, oh, okay, I see how actually that's what all this stuff is. Yeah. So I like that juxtaposition.
When you do your next book, do you suspect at this point that it's going to be a longer narrative?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, well, here's an idea I had. So you guys weigh in if you like this idea. But one thing that I was thinking of writing about was all the jobs I'd ever had. And it would be called Day Job, maybe. But it would have narration, but the narration would be like what you're thinking about while you're at work. So it would almost be like 2 stories going on, like but the narration would be, instead of like separated out like notes, it would be like the panels would each have the like little thoughts. And then sometimes what you're thinking about is what's happening. Cause like, you know, someone bursts in or whatever it is. And sometimes it would sync up and it would go along with it. And then sometimes it would be separate. And I thought that would be like a cool, because I've had several ridiculous jobs and then this one job for a very long time. So I thought that would be like a fun thing to write about. Yeah. Kind of different. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds like a solid idea.
Yeah. It makes it. So that's one I've been doing the most work on.
I mean, this is one of those places though, where I'm just going to be in Eric Reynolds' corner and go, yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, I know. Well,
do it.
Eric might be getting my email soon.
Make a comic. Hey, we'll publish it.
Yeah, I think that would be a pretty cool book. And I think pretty universal because so many of us have had jobs. Yeah. And then so many of us have had crappy day jobs. Yeah. And then so many of us have been lost in our thoughts while at work. So I think it could be like a really interesting topic. Yeah. Yeah. And now that you've done a book that is explicitly meant to be aimed at young adults, do you think that you want to stay in that space, or I don't know. This one, I guess I wasn't really thinking YA particularly, but I'm gonna like make this new category of like, what if we just didn't like put a label on it? Yeah. So I don't know. I think I would probably gear it more towards myself and then see sort of how it ended up. I think that's probably what I would do. Yeah. Because
I certainly, there are some authors who have started working in YA and then never were able to get back.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who write YA and I love their books, and I have a difficult time. I've thought about trying to write something more explicitly YA or middle grade, and I can't do it. I can't make myself do it. Like, even though I love their books, I like read them even though I don't have to. Like, but
well, a lot of it too, it becomes explicitly genre material, right? Like, that's just the easiest way to make that happen.
Right, right. Yeah, that does not come particularly easy, much like writing comedy doesn't come easy to me. I'm off the cuff. Yeah.
I hear you. Well, nobody else has any more questions. Oh, there we go. Oh.
Yeah. So is there anything about this book that challenged you as an artist, either like stylistically or like, because this has so many more words than ephemera? Like, was that a challenge as in the development of creating it?
Of writing it?
Yeah. Writing or design.
Yeah, it was, in terms of writing, it was kind of fun because that was really different. And I think that's the thing I'm the most nervous about being out in the world, because I've never really, like, most of my comics have been wordless. And then ephemera had a few words. And then this has a lot of words. So that was one thing that I was like, I finished the book and was like, oh my God, wait, everyone's going to read that. So that was like fun to do. And then now I'm like, that's a little personal. That's the parts that feel more personal to me. In terms of the drawing, it was honestly like such a fun book to draw. There wasn't anything that was particularly difficult. It was just so fun researching all the things to draw. And then like even the streets, I spent so long on Google Maps and trying to like get the oldest picture I could, and then referencing that with other photos and like trying to remember what color houses were painted. It was just like, so that was so fun. And then drawing all the 90s stuff was really great. And then, what was it about our baggy pants that made them look like particularly 90s, things like that. I just really truly just draw stuff that I like to do. Like with ephemera, I just love drawing plants. And so I made a book that I could sort of put a bunch of plants in. And then with this one, I just was having so much fun feeling those teenage vibes. So there wasn't really anything too difficult that way. Yeah. It's just so
fun. Was there anything in terms of research that you had a hard time finding?
Well, my high school's been torn down and rebuilt, so that was a little bit of a bummer because I only had a few photos to go off of. And we don't have a lot of photos of our houses, of some of the houses we lived in. So I relegated it to just a couple of them, but you can't even really tell. Like, and I don't care if you can tell what house we're in right now. So that was hard. And finding cars, that was like weirdly like trying to remember what cars people had that would have been accurate. Like the cars along the side of the road, I guess is what I'm saying. So it's like, I knew a car we had, but what would a street have looked like?
Sure.
Like what would a street have looked like in 1995 and trying to think about that. So there were some things like that were sort of like.
Aren't movies generally contemporaneous for what you're going to see?
Right. Like if I just watched like Pulp Fiction and watch what was on the side of the road.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I could have done that if I wanted to take the easy road. No, but yeah, but trying to, I guess it was just all those little bits and trying to keep that accurate. That was the more difficult parts. Yeah.
It felt true. I
mean,
as someone who lived through this, yes, a lot of this felt really true.
High school. Yeah.
Telephones too.
Yeah, that's what my phone looked like in high school. It looked like an oldie tiny phone. It was very cool.
Payphones. Amoeba. That looks like Amoeba looked like back then.
Yeah, because it's changed a little bit.
It's changed quite a bit.
Yeah. And Shambhala Books. Remember Shambhala Books was next to Meows. And I'm actually reading that Aaron Comet Bus book about Meows and all the bookstores on Telegraph. And I was like, God damn it, why didn't I read this 2 years ago? Because it had some fun details about those stores. That was really fun. Yeah.
Well, this is a good book. I just really want to say that. I'll say it again. It's very warm, but it's also very lonely, and it's very nostalgic, but it's also very bright. You hit all the right feels the way they needed to be done, and
that was my goal. So I really appreciate you seeing that. I really wanted it to have all those feelings, but not too much in any direction where it felt overbearing with one or the other.
Yeah, no, I think you achieved your goal very, very well here.
Thank you.
Yeah, normally the next thing I would ask would be, is there something else you want to plug? But I think we've
I think everyone should buy this book.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yes.
And buy a book for a friend or buy ephemera if you haven't gotten it.
And if you happen to buy a copy from our website, which the thing will pop up on the screen, I'm sure any minute now, it'll come with a really, really, really nice signed book plate.
I know those are pretty sweet.
It is very sweet.
Yeah, those are great.
Yeah, it's really nice. So, awesome.
Well, I wanted to say thanks to you and Kat and everyone who works at Comic Experience for having me. It's really, really special to get chosen for this book club, and really, really nice. And the pizza was great, and I'm very excited. I got to sign the bathroom. It'll be like my drawing.
I will go and look at it soon. Yeah, no, we
enjoy it.
We pick books because we like them and we think they're good. So
I'll make you some more.
Please. I literally cannot wait to see like when you're at book 10, like where you go and what you do.
Well, I really want to write about my kids, but they are horrified at that idea. But
yeah, you probably have to wait till they're in their 20s.
Well, I'm going to wait till they really have decided to not like me. They still like me right now, and then I'm going to do it. Because then I can do whatever I want. Right now, I still need to buy their love.
A little bit.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then, so the last question is much like the first. It's the same all the time. And, this one will probably be a walk for you. This is a club that has been going on for 10 years now, if you can believe this.
Happy birthday.
10 years of doing this. And so, because of these interviews, we get a lot of people who want to make comics, want to make art. And they don't have faith in themselves to be able to do it. They don't think they're good enough. They don't think they're smart enough, or gosh darn it, that people like them.
People don't like them.
So what would you say to a person like that to encourage them to express themselves? It could be something physical and practical and tangible. It could be something emotional. It could be something spiritual. What do you got for us?
It's not going to be spiritual. Just do it. I mean, the biggest roadblock to people not making art is just not making art. So if you just make it and get it out there, you are so much farther than so many people. And chances are it's going to start to go pretty good. And it might not be the first thing you put out is a New York Times bestseller, but I really can't encourage people enough to just make the art. And then the biggest thing is make art that you love. Like for me, that's all I do is I really am like, I make books that I want to read. And if you love it, that's all you can do. So I don't try to be someone else. Like if you love someone, that's awesome. Just steal their best ideas and incorporate it into your ideas, but just do the stuff that you really love. Even if it looks like someone else's stuff, who cares? Make what you love. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Give me a minute here to do some,
Great.
to do a little bit of, oh, you're going to go.
Am I done? Oh, what am I
You
doing?
don't have to
No,
go. I was just,
I
no, I was just going to do a little thank yous, etc. Where am I? Am I looking at the back camera? Yeah. I'm looking
Sorry,
at the back
guys.
camera. Hey, so you sitting at home, you were sitting at home, you need something to read, you don't know what to do. I recommend Raised by Ghosts very, very, very much. It will give you feels, it will make you think, it will touch you as a human, and what else can you ask for? So get yourself a copy of Raised by Ghosts. Next month we're going in the completely opposite direction, and we're doing a book called The Pedestrian, which is kind of sort of a superhero comic about a guy who walks around the city.
I love it.
And it's fun and funny, and yeah, it's totally very, very, very different.
Yeah.
But look for that show next
great.
month. And about 2 weeks after this show is the Kids Club, and the book is A Song for You and I by Kay O'Neill. And this is beautiful. And Kay will be talking to us from New Zealand, of all wonderful places. So we will be. You want to see that one?
I do.
Sounds good. I have some thank yous to make. I want to thank Jordan, my producer, who you guys don't know anything about here, but I literally the show couldn't happen without Jordan. So thank you, Jordan. I want to thank Ben for running the show and doing the cameras and all the stuff and making the physicality of this happen. Because again, couldn't be done without him. I want to thank my staff. I want to thank Kat and Katie and Chrissy and Max for just being the best staff that a comic shop can have and letting me do this. I could not sit and talk with artists if I didn't have them, helping and taking care of the store. And I want to thank all the members of the club. If you haven't become a member, please consider it. It helps keep the store alive. I mean, it literally keeps the store alive. So that's a good thing. And we try to show good taste in comics and move things forward. And then finally, thanks to creators like you. I would not have a store if it wasn't for people like you making comics. I would have a store full of blank paper, which would really suck.
Well, I would have a bunch of books at my house. So it all works out great. Yeah. Thank you for having my book.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. And thanks to you guys for coming.
Yeah, and thanks
today.
for you guys for coming out today. Yeah, thank you so much. All right. That's it. And we will see you next time for another Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club. Thanks.